Sorry. It is 7 o'clock, so we will call the meeting for January for the Hartsville-Traviston County Planning Commission to order. First item on our agenda is our roll call. Mary Ann, would you like to do that, please?
Mary Ann Baker's here. Sarah Murray. Here. John Kerr.
Here.
Rhonda Kiesling. Here. David Nallner.
Here.
David Thomas.
Here.
Carol Pruitt. Here. Mark Swaffer.
Here.
Thomas Harper. And Sam Edwards.
Here.
Looks like all is present except the Grinch, Mr. Harper. He's probably out stealing presents. No. Next on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. There's the Grinch. Did you hear me? I said everybody was present except the Grinch, and I said you was probably out stealing presents. So we have a full commission tonight. Again, next on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. You've had these now for several weeks. Chance to look over them. Are there any corrections or additions anyone would like to make to the minutes for last month? Hearing none and seeing none, I will call for a motion to approve November's minutes.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion by Mr. Swaffer. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Nallner. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. The minutes for November 2021 are approved. All right, we'll go right into our new business as we have several items in our new business. First is a request by Jeff Eddy for the rezoning of 470 acres. I'm sorry, for the rezoning of 470 Scruggs Lane, which is 3.12 acres. We'd like to rezone that from A1 to R1 for the purpose of creating a 2-lot subdivision. Is anyone here, Mr. Eddy here, or anyone here to speak for Mr. Eddy? Yes, ma'am. If you would please come up to the podium over here. And Sarah, could you turn that microphone on for it's.
Hi, I'm Becky Andrews. I'm Mr. Eddy's real estate agent. And we had a soil scientist come out and do a preliminary evaluation on the lot and found a suitable soil to divide the lot. And then we had a surveyor come out and do a preliminary sketch, which we turned into Rosalie Myhand, and of what the lot would look like with the 3 acres divided.
Okay. Any members have any questions for this young lady? Yes, sir.
Question I have is looking at the map that we were given. It looks like a good portion of the property is right on a floodplain. Is there going to be enough room to put a structure there and not be in the floodplain?
I don't know. I didn't know there was a floodplain.
Are you aware of that? Yeah. Okay. I thought you were. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't know there was a floodplain on. I wasn't aware of that.
And she's the real estate person, so
yes.
She's not the person that went out and actually looked at the property. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it, but
yes. But I mean, I wasn't aware of any floodplain on the property. Did you?
There's some comments in our planner's report, which you might want to listen to. Mary, let's go to you then, and so that you can go over your report.
Okay, I'll jump to the portion on the floodplain. The property is partially constrained by flood hazard zone area A, which I believe has a minimum flood elevation attached to it, but I'm not sure. Would have to look into that. So, but during the platting or development phase of this property, as she's talking about subdividing the 3 acres, the Planning Commission would review the plat for any effects for the subdivision regulations policy on flood prone areas. which is intended to assist the commission in determining the appropriateness of any land subdivision in floodplain areas. We've talked about that before when looking at a rezoning in the floodplain, so I did want to make you all aware of that. Besides that, I'm going to jump back a little bit and talk about the other items to consider. So these properties are in the Hartsville Water and Sewer Utility District. I believe there's a water line on Scruggs Lane in this area. I'm not sure if it serves the property, but I'm sure the applicant can confirm that. The property is not identified as having any significant steep slopes, just that floodplain area, zone A, which is not the 100-year, I believe it's the 500-year. The growth plan identifies this as a rural area outside the urban services district growth boundary. Again, the plan states that rural areas are not prevented from being used as commercial, residential, or industrial development. However, any such use should be less dense and should retain the character of the area. Low to moderate density will be allowed in this area. Scruggs Lane, this road is not identified as an arterial or collector in the major thoroughfare plan. And I have the zoning district standards listed for A1, which is currently zoned, and then R1 is also listed here. And the R1 district permits single family and duplex dwellings, essential services, and then accessory uses and structures to the dwellings. And the bulk standards are listed in your packet, so you can see the minimum lot size required. I believe this is served with water, so the smallest lot would be an acre, as I'm assuming it does not have public wastewater. So the lot size that could be from this 3-acre property would potentially be 3 lots, but I think it sounds like the applicant has listed 2 is what she's looking for. In summary, oh, and then I think I forgot to mention, as far as the adjacent zoning, and I think you can see it, it's maybe not zoomed out far enough. On page 4 of your packet, there is all the surrounding properties are zoned A1. I think it's about a quarter of a mile down the road at the intersection. There is some properties that are zoned R1 already in that area. So there's no surrounding property zoned R1, but there are properties at that intersection with Lick Creek about 0.4 miles away to the south. The R1 residential zoning district is noting as being suitable for areas where development at a suburban density is not appropriate or feasible. Development in the zoning district is intended to be low density, characterized by an open appearance, which seems consistent with the character of the area. And that R1 zoning district we've determined in the past is usually consistent with the gross plan designation of rural areas. Which states that residential is appropriate at a lower density that retains the character of the area. So I think the main concern with this property is just the flood hazard zone. But again, that's a lower level. It's not a 100-year floodway or anything by any means, but it would be somewhat restrictive, I believe, to what you would be able to develop on the property.
Okay. Any members of the commission have any questions for Mary?
I do. I'm not sure if it's Sam or if it's Mary. I'm not clear as why is this different than the other ones and classified as a subdivision? Seems like that would make it harder. Why is this a subdivision and not just splitting the lot into 2?
It's just a rezoning. She'd like to rezone the property to get the lot size that she wants. So in the A1 district, she can't subdivide a 3-acre lot into a smaller than that lot, and she wants to subdivide, I'm sure, probably off an acre.
Yes.
So with an R1 zoning, that would be a feasible option. She could have 2 properties here, a 2-acre and a 1-acre, or
It's like a 1.5 maybe,
Yeah.
1.61 and 1.53.
with the A1 zoning district, I believe the smallest
It's
is
3.
2 acres or 3.
Right. We've had that for several years, and A1, the minimum lot size is 3 acres.
No, I understand that, but we got other things on here that's not, could be 1 acre too, and it's not subdivisions. So I was just confused by the term and the way it's.
Yeah, subdivision doesn't really
This is just
apply to the
so
size.
right
Okay,
now
so
Maybe it's
just
just me.
dividing.
Maybe it's
Okay.
just me.
Right now, she's
confusing
rezoning.
to me.
She would come back with a plat to subdivide after it's rezoned. At this point in time with the A1 zoning, the smallest lot size that she can have is 3 acres.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
So she wants to rezone to R1. And after it was rezoned, if the rezoning did go through and was approved, she would then come back in with the subdivision plat to separate the two properties.
Gotcha. Thanks.
It is possible that when they tried to get their soils done, if they haven't already had them done and stuff, the floodplain could come into effect there, but they may already have all that done. Let's go to Sam. He, see his report on this.
So to answer the flood question, the house that's currently there, if you look at the flood map that's been provided, that little half moon area that's outside of the flood zone, that's towards the actual Scruggs Lane, that's where the current house is sitting. So the portion to the right that has all the open area that's outside the flood zone in the back is potential building area. So they do have adequate area to build. And the flood zone doesn't necessarily come into effect with septic systems. They don't care. So.
Any other questions for Sam? Sam, you've looked at this more than anybody. Do you have a recommendation for this?
I don't, my recommendation would be to approve it.
Okay, just wondered. All right, we've heard from Sam, our codes inspector and building inspector, and Mary. Questions for either one of them or comments from any members of the commission? Concerns? Of course, what they're asking for is a rezone, which will go to the county court. They are the only ones that can rezone property. And then should it be rezoned by them, then any plats or anything like that would come back to this body. All right, so hearing no questions. Have a motion by Mr. Noller to approve. David, have a second. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. It does pass. You can get with Sam and he can tell you about, you may already know when the county court's not going to meet this month, is it, Mary? So it'll be January before they can go through first reading. They typically take the month of December off.
Okay, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, next on our agenda is a request by Zach Scott, Jordan Fleming for the rezoning of Tempolo Road, 16.21 acres, which is in Civil District 8, and they would like to rezone this from A1 to R1 to create 6 buildable lots, which will be less than 5 acres each. Is Mr. Scott or Mr. Fleming here?
Good evening, Jordan Fleming, here to answer any questions you all might have about this.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for, or you're Mr. Fleming?
Yes, sir.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Fleming at this point, or we can go to Mary and Sam, and then you may have some then that Mr. Fleming might can answer. Okay, Mary?
I'll go through the full report on this. I do have one question, and maybe Sam or the applicant can answer this. Do you know if this property is served by water?
Yes, it
currently?
is.
Okay. I wasn't sure. I called Castilian Springs, but they couldn't answer that for
On
me.
both sides, on Tempolo, and then there's road frontage on Bass.
That has both have water. Okay, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to clarify that. The
That's
surrounding,
Castilian Springs, isn't it? Or is
Yes,
that
sir.
hard?
it's
No,
actually Hartsville water sewer
Yes.
on Bass.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
Castilian Springs ends right off the interstate there.
Okay.
I just wasn't sure which one served the property. So for this, the surrounding properties are zoned A1 and R1 in the area. And there's a map on your packet on page 8 where you can see that zoning. You can see the adjacent properties that are both zoned R1 already. Again, the property is served by water. It's not in a special flood hazard area and is not identified as having any significant steep slopes. The growth plan identifies this as a rural area, and as I stated before, the rural areas are not prevented from being used as commercial, residential, or industrial development. However, any use should be less dense and should retain the character of the area. Low to moderate density is allowed in these areas. This road is identified as a collector in the major thoroughfare plan, or a secondary street. I've included the zoning district standards for A1 and R1 in your packet again, and so you can see the minimum lot size again. If this property is served by water but does not have wastewater, that would be 1 acre required as the minimum. In staff surrounding of this request, the property is not constrained by flood hazard or steep slopes. There's adjacent and nearby properties that are zoned R1. The R1 residential zoning district is noted as being suitable for areas, again, where development as suburban density is not appropriate or feasible, but development in the zoning district is intended to be low density, characterized by an open appearance, which seems consistent with the character of the area. And there is R1 zoning districts, zoned properties nearby. And I have said this in the past and we've talked about it. There's some concern about potential for driveway connections on a collector road, but that could be reviewed at the platting phase if this property does develop. Could be looked at and mitigated to have those driveways enter at a different location or be combination driveways or something like that. And that would be the main concern from my perspective.
Questions for Mary before we move on to Sam? All right, Sam?
So the request is for the rezoning. It has R1 on both sides of it. It has 2 roads. And it has water, so I don't see any issues with the approval of the request. Like Mary said, the road access and the lot setup, all that can be reviewed when it comes forward for the subdivisions.
I think we all know there's been a lot of homes built down Bass Road and in this area already. Questions for Sam? All right, commission members, anybody have any questions or comments? Would anyone like to make a motion to approve or deny this request? Well, it wouldn't be a denial. It would just be to send it to the county court with an approval or a I don't take finger pointing. Somebody going to have to say something. Yes, sir. Motion by Mr. Noller to approve the request. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Thomas. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, say no. It is approved.
Thank you.
It's Christmas, but I'm not that generous.
If we can please use our mics, because I think Amy over here is recording everything, right?
Next on our agenda is a request by Brian Boker for the rezoning of 190 Pike Lane, which is 3.86 acres in Civil District 10. And he would like to rezone this from A1 to R1 to subdivide into 2 lots. Mr. Boker, is Mr. Boker here? Oh, okay.
Hello. I'm not sure we're quite subdividing it into 2 lots. We currently own 120 Pike Lane. We also own 190 Pike Lane.
Could I interrupt you? Could you tell us who you are?
Oh,
first,
I'm so
please?
sorry. My name is Stephanie Boker.
Okay.
So our current home at 190, or I'm sorry, 120,
We own approximately 9 acres, part of which is a lower field that connects to 190. 190 has a lower property that's basically blocked off by a rock bluff, and it's inaccessible. But to access it, they would have to go through our home at 190, or I'm sorry, at 120. So our intentions are to just combine the 2 lower fields to 120 Pike Lane. And then we would ultimately fence off the rock bluff at 190. So I don't know if it's subdividing it is the correct terminology, but that's our intentions with it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if I understand you correctly, you're really trying to combine 2 lots instead of subdividing 2 lots?
So one of the lots has a piece of property in the back that is inaccessible without going through another lot. So she wants to cut that back portion off and give it to the other lot that it is accessible to. But to do that, it will make the other lot too small. So
Okay, so it would create a non-conforming lot
it would,
unless
we rezone it.
unless we rezone it.
Is,
Okay.
is there any plans to use the back portion of the lot at 190?
No, we're
entirely in
planning
the
on
floodway.
planting Christmas trees, so it's in a flood zone. I mean, we live
Yeah,
right
it's
up
in
against
the
the Cumberland River, so there is no intent of putting any property or anything down there. Currently, we just use the field as a field, and that's how it would remain.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that because it is totally in the floodway. So
Oh,
it's
yeah,
definitely
we
not developed.
very well aware. We were canoeing in it this past March, so.
Is the 120 on the map that we got on the agenda, is that 20.05? Or is that somewhere else? The north on the,
So let me get all my stuff up.
just trying to understand where that is.
All righty. So the 190 is the 20.04. And then the one that's being chopped is the 20.03 to the south. I think.
But we're asking to
Sorry,
rezone 20.
I've got that backwards. Hold on. Working on a small device here. Let's see.
You want to look at this?
Yeah, it doesn't tell me
This is
anything.
north.
So 190's to the south, and that is Brooker. So that is the portion, the 20.04 is the portion that's being chopped, sorry. And then it's being added to the one to the north. Yeah. Which those 2 neighboring lots are already zoned R1 to the north. It would, yes, it's neighboring it already neighbors R1 properties. So we're just, I think her request is reasonable. It's unusable piece of property and her zoning request is reasonable. So her to get the rezoning, it's conforming with what's already there. And then she wants to add the portion that's unusable to a lot that can use it. So I think her request is reasonable.
Does everybody understand now? Any other questions for Sam or Ms. Boker at this time before we go to Mary? All right, Mary.
Okay, I'm gonna go through the same report I've gone through for the other rezonings, and highlight the same details. This property's in the Hartsville Water and Sewer Utility District. There's a water line on Pike Lane in this area. The rear of this property is in a special flood hazard zone, as we talked about, along the river. Besides that, the property is not identified as having any significant steep slopes in my map, but I'm assuming there is a pretty large bluff that actually goes down to the river. The growth plan identifies this as a rural area. Again, the rural areas are not prevented from being used as commercial, residential, or industrial development, but should be at a less dense volume and should retain the character of the area. Low to moderate density is allowed in those areas. Pike Lane, this road is not identified as an arterial or collector in the major thoroughfare plan. Again, the minimum lot size that would be allowed in this area, if it is only served by water and not sewer, would be 1 acre. This property is partially complained by this flood plan, but as we've heard from the applicant, there's no plans to use that portion of the property, and because it's a floodway, she would be restricted in what she would be able to do in that anyway. And the planning commission could review the plat for any effects per the subdivision regulation section policy on flood-prone areas at the time if a plat was submitted for this property to determine the appropriateness of any proposed subdivision. Again, the property has access to water on Pike Lane. The 2 adjacent properties are zoned R1. The R1 residential zoning district is noted as being suitable for areas where a suburban density is not appropriate or feasible. And the R1 zoning district seems to be consistent with that growth plan designation of rural areas. Any questions for me?
Any questions for Mary at this time? Discussion? Comments? Yes, sir.
I do have one question. Sam, you spoke about this Pike Lane. This is the old 141.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was confused with that. I mean, but where it cut it, right.
Like to make a motion to approve.
Have a motion by David to approve,
I'll second.
second by Mary Ann. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. It does pass.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boker. Next on our agenda is final plat approval of Crestview Acres subdivision, which is 12.2 acres. It's in Civil District 1. You possibly have this map, should have this map. Mr. Carmen's here to speak to it. We can, Sam and I can share one if we need to. Okay.
Actually, I did forget my laptop though, so I will take a paper copy. Thank you.
Do we need this one? You need this one. Jim, if you need another one, there's, if you need it.
I don't need it.
All right, Jim.
This is Crestview Acres up here across from the county garage. Came in front of the body as a preliminary several months back. Took a while to get our engineering all squared away because they were so busy. But anyway, they're looking at doing phase 2 of this, and be glad to address any questions you might have.
How many homes would it be? 32? Is that right? Am I seeing that right?
I think that's just all.
Or is that just the numbering?
I think it's 21 lots.
Okay.
The numbering sequence is off of the
Original.
the sketch plat, the preliminary that got everything brought in different phases.
It is 21 plus the postal box, so that's 21 and a quarter. So,
Any questions for Jim? Okay. Mary?
So for this, and like Mr. Carmen said, we did look at the preliminary for this a few months ago, and that preliminary came forward without opportunity for me to comment on it prior to the meeting. So there are just some things that we didn't look at as closely during the preliminary that I'm going to mention this evening. The first would be that the end of phase 2 here where Crestview Circle ends, I had asked that a temporary cul-de-sac be provided, and so that dead end road has that temporary cul-de-sac as is required in the subdivision regulations until it's built out. And he has added that on the plat. I would just ask that a temporary setback be shown on lot 17 as well. And you can make the note that that would revert to the typical setback at the time that that cul-de-sac's gone, just so there's no issue there. And then my other question is the temporary cul-de-sac is kind of ending at the lot where the mailbox is now. So I do just want to make sure, and I didn't have time to collect a comment from the fire department or anything like that, but just make sure that the width of that temporary cul-de-sac is still going to be big enough with the mailbox there.
Excuse me. That will not be an issue. The mailbox itself will be at the back of the mailbox area, which is shown on your little map. So there won't be any issue that actually, because of the pavement width right there, there will be plenty of room to turn around and get in and out right there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, then if the temporary setback could just be shown with the note that that'll
Yeah,
revert
that's
to the typical.
that's no issue. We can crop that off. That will not affect the building envelope to amount to anything.
Okay,
right
and
there.
I didn't see if the note was on there, but the same note can be made for the right of way around that it'll revert back to the normal once that cul-de-sac is removed. For the other item, and I believe we did talk about this in the preliminary, the new streets that are shown here, since this has gone through the initial development and it expired and he came back with a preliminary plat, we've added the requirement for sidewalks. So section 4-801-108.1, sidewalks along new streets. Sidewalks are required along streets constructed in all subdivision regulations, excluding alleys and those streets proposed for industrial use. So for this plat, sidewalks would be required to be provided on Crestview Circle on both sides of the street. And the final plat at this point in time does not show sidewalks. So that's a variance that Mr. Carmen, I believe, would like to request.
Yes,
I'm
that's
assuming-
correct. We would like to request a variance from the sidewalk regulation concerning phase 2 of this Crestview Acres.
Okay. And then the other items that are in our report, which were generally minor items, have been addressed today. He resubmitted a new site plan for the mailbox and the plat. So those items that are listed have been included now. So my recommendation for this plat would be approval with the condition that the setbacks be amended around the cul-de-sac, as well as required sidewalks are shown and included on the plat.
Any questions for Mary? Before we move on to Sam? Yes, sir. Will there be runoff problems there?
This is already, excuse me, this has been engineered. All the stormwater and everything has been addressed in the engineering aspect of this.
So the Carmen, you provided me that engineering, right?
Yes,
Yes.
well,
Yeah.
I brought
Yeah.
it to you. It came from.
I didn't remember who brought it, but yes.
Yeah, we dropped it off, but
so-
mid-10 engineering, Evan White with mid-10 engineering did
Yeah.
all the engineering on the road.
I've thoroughly reviewed it. They've taken care of the water drainage issues. They've taken care of the two river crosses or creek crosses, whatever you want to call them. So it's been engineered to take care of the flood issues.
I want to confirm what Mary said. You recommend approval, but adding the sidewalks.
Correct. I recommend,
So no variance for the regulation. No,
correct.
okay, I misunderstood what he was
That's her
asking.
recommendation.
Okay.
My recommendation is approval without a variance and with the condition that the setbacks be shown, but I think he said that's no issue to correct.
Any other questions for Mary before we go to Sam? All right, Sam.
So I've reviewed the minutes from the last time that this came through, and it just says that the sidewalks were discussed. It doesn't say what the determination was. My recollection, which is usually very accurate, is that we decided that they were going to have them. It doesn't say it in the minutes though, but Mr. Carmen's requested a variance for it. So the decision tonight is, are we going to uphold that decision of requiring it? Or are we going to grant that variance? But on my end, the subdivision itself, the way it sits on the lots, everything looks good. He's got the postal box. He's got 2 parking areas for it. I've thoroughly reviewed the engineering plans and they're good. So the only question that I have is the same one that y'all got to answer is, are we going to require the sidewalks?
Just as a comment, that the sidewalks in this situation are not going anywhere. There's no sidewalks on East Main. There's no sidewalks in section 1 of Crestview. These would just be sidewalks out in an isolated section of the subdivision. And so that's why we request a variance on this.
Mr. Thomas?
Wouldn't the sidewalks be going to the communal mailbox, which was the purpose of us putting this in? This
Well, they
requirement?
would be leading that way. Obviously, they would not continue down where the existing homes are because they weren't required at that time.
I think that was the deciding factor in our last discussion was the mailbox, which is the same thing that we were discussing about the other subdivisions and how to get to the mailbox.
In phase 1, each house has its own individual mailbox in phase 1. So they wouldn't need use of the communal mailbox. So the sidewalk would start where phase 2 starts and would go to the communal mailbox.
Correct. And then once phase 3 comes through, the sidewalks will continue up to phase 1 on the other side.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. You're right. After phase 3 or the final development, then they would connect. And that was one of our leading factors of requiring sidewalks, was the safety of people walking to get their mail. You have something else saying? You look like you're going to say something.
I decided it was a personal opinion and kept it to myself.
Okay. Okay. I understand. Questions for Sam? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Was the sidewalk regulation approved? I was not on the commission at that time. Was it approved before the initial Crestview Acres came
No, ma'am.
forward or after?
After,
Okay.
long time after.
So yeah, to clarify, the initial Crestview Acres came through a number of years ago and that preliminary plat approval had expired. So he came forward with a new preliminary plat for the other 2 phases. And the commission reviewed and approved a new preliminary plat for phases 2 and 3. So that is why it's now subject to the regulation that was put in place for sidewalks during that time. Does that clarify?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Other questions?
John,
I'm
and
sorry.
also at that time, we didn't have cluster mailboxes.
Right.
So that was a difference too,
Yeah,
sir.
those houses. have
Now
been
we
there for a
have
number of
cluster
years.
mailboxes, and it was just like he was coming to us with a new subdivision. That's why we did it this way.
He does have a valid request for the variance, just for the fact that there's already a portion existing in this subdivision. It is a valid request. But like I said, we've discussed this the last meeting. With the cluster mailboxes now being required, our concern with all the other subdivisions is how are you going to get there without having to drive? So.
To me, the issue is or the two ways to look at it from my point of view is if this was the last phase, the sidewalks would literally go nowhere. If they develop the future phase, and that's an if, we don't know what the property owner or anybody's going to do, but it could wind up leading to the cluster mailboxes and that type of thing in the future, whenever that might be, if ever that might be. Yes, sir.
Just a comment. I think I've mentioned this before, but I think as a commission, we need to be consistent in what we're doing. So if we start making exceptions, I think that's just setting us up for a pretty bad reputation as we get further down the road. So that's just why I just think we need to be consistent with our requirements.
Good point. Jim?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Given the direction that I see that we are headed, and Mr. Robbins could not be here this evening, he has asked that we defer this until next month.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.
So, we don't need it. Make sure we do this legal.
You just deferred, we just accept that and move it to next month's agenda.
Yeah, the board's on it, was made a mistake. They're like, make sure we do it right.
Okay, what do we need to do then?
I think we just ignore it, like you didn't ignore, like we do the same if somebody wasn't here to speak on it. Because they voted on their PCA meeting, once you vote on it, they can't come back forward for another.
So are you saying we don't?
We just ignore it, like we didn't even see it.
The deferral?
Yeah.
So we think I asked for a motion?
No, we just move on to the next topic.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Jim, you want your papers back? Okay. Are you the next one too? Oh, okay. Okay, well, you got to be because that's the last one. So we will move on then to our last item on our agenda, which is final plat approval of Paul Meyers and Linda Meyers, 169 Cemetery Lane, 2.5 acres into a 4-lot subdivision. Let me just give it a quick look and then you can have it.
I think this one's fairly straightforward. The Meyers are looking at subdividing their corner out here on Cemetery Lane and Harriet Lane into 4 lots, existing road frontage, existing infrastructure. I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Mr. Carmen? At this time, everybody knows where this is, going down Cemetery Road, out to the end of it where Harriet Lane starts. Okay, Mary?
For this plat, I'll just mention the minimum lot size in the R2 zoning district is 7,500 square foot. All proposed lots exceed that size. There are a few items that I had noted to be added or corrected. I did receive a resubmittal this afternoon correcting those items, so those have all been addressed. So on this plat, staff and I will note that with this being, you know, an additional plat, sidewalks could be a consideration for this, but in this plat, there is no sidewalks in the area that I believe that this would connect into. So for this 4-lot subdivision, I don't think that requiring sidewalks would be practical in this case, unless for some reason there are sidewalks that connect to the area that we're not aware of, or a cluster mailbox would be required for 4 lots, which I think is not what the mailbox Postal Service is requiring. So for this item, staff is recommending approval on the plat with the condition that all the signature boxes be signed prior to that approval for recording.
Okay. And Mary is correct. There's no current sidewalks down that Harrod or Cemetery Road. Questions for Mary? I'm sorry?
There wouldn't be a cluster mailbox requirement for that either.
All right, Sam?
I don't see any issues with this one. I've already reviewed it, and the plat that's been submitted looks fine to me.
Okay, questions for Sam? Discussion, comments? Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Have a motion by Sarah to approve the request. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second by Mr. Swafford. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Item is approved. Yes, sir.
I do want to make sure it's clear that on that motion, that was to give them the variance for not having to have the sidewalks on this, as Mary suggested.
Was that part of your motion? Do they need a variance for that, Mary?
I've got my laptop, so I don't have the exact language, but I believe
Do?
it's over 40,000 square foot. I think it's over 40,000 square foot lots would give them the relief from this. So these lots are smaller than that. So it would need a variance. That is correct.
Okay. Well, just add that you.
I think we have language in there that sidewalks, wait, actually, I think I have it in the packet. Sorry, one moment.
But we may have to just approve the variance for it just to keep our rules in line.
Sidewalks may not be required along rural streets where all lots fronting such streets are 40,000 square feet or larger in size and have an average road frontage of 150 feet or more. So for these properties, they don't fall under that, so they would need the variance. That is correct.
All right. I'm wondering if the best way would be to just withdraw the second.
Can I just make a motion to grant a variance for this?
Well, we've got a motion on the floor in a second that we haven't disposed of. So would you like to withdraw your second?
I didn't second.
Oh, and
Yeah, I
Sarah-
can withdraw mine.
Okay. Sarah, would you withdraw your motion?
I would like to withdraw the motion.
Okay. Now we're starting all over. So would anyone like to make a motion and include a variance for the sidewalks in this area?
I'd like to make a motion to approve with a variance.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I second.
All right. Motion by Sarah, second by Mark to approve this subdivision and to provide and to approve a variance where sidewalks are not included. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. Motion does carry.
Now that we've gone through and given the variance, I will make the comment. I have realized that this is the portion that says along existing streets. There's a second portion in the subdivision regulations. I'm sorry, that says new streets. There's a second portion for existing streets that I believe references if there's no adjacent sidewalks, they would not be required to put them in. But I don't have the language in front of me, so I think issuing the variance is fine for it.
Next on our agenda, we don't have any discussion topics. Report from the chairman. The chairman knows nothing. Report from the building inspector. You have that there in front of you. Does that include what Sam started providing there? Is that what everybody wanted? And everybody likes that, having that there and everything?
That's completely thanks to Ms. Rosalie. So y'all can thank her.
Closing remarks from the chair and the commission. Does any commissioner wish to say anything? I'm not asking for a motion. I mean, would you like to say anything?
Mr. Chairman, we were asked, I think in the last meeting, for training purposes, that we need to be on record in this meeting. So I think I sent a note, but
Yeah, so
I've
Commissioner,
listened to the.
Mr. Swaffer is noting that he did complete his 3 hours. Actually, probably did all 4 of them, additional of the virtual training. Did anyone else in time between last meeting and this meeting complete their training?
I did also.
I did.
Okay, so then we have Kiesling as well as Thomas.
And I did the first time. We talked about that last
Yes,
month.
yeah, just to make sure everybody gets in the minutes since there was no
Mr. Noller,
certificate.
this first time or this last time?
This last time.
Mr. Noller, did you get him? So those that haven't completed their training, see me after, I'll have you right off. That's the old school teacher in me coming up.
Yeah, to clarify for our newer members, you are required to do 4 hours of training per year. There was a virtual training option available and there's a recording of that training option. So if you have any issue completing that, please feel free to reach out to me and I can help you with that as well. Okay.
All right, any other comments from any commissioner? Procrastination, that was her word, wasn't it? She used it on me many, many times and was right. The only closing remark the chair would like to make is that he would like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas. Hope everybody's able to be with their family and loved ones during this time. Last couple of years has been kind of iffy for some families on that. And so I hope you're all able to get together and enjoy the season and just hopefully begin to get things back to normal. Anyone else have anything before we ask for a motion to adjourn? Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Mr. Noller makes a motion. Do I have a second? We are adjourned.